The unexpected sound. The galaxy was still. It had been like this for centuries. The Galactic Empire, with its powerful fleets and vast resources, ruled with an iron fist. No one dared challenge them. Earth, a small and seemingly insignificant planet in the far reaches of space, had long been forgotten. Few in the Empire even remembered it existed. But something had changed. Something on Earth had been awakened. Commander Rachel Locke stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, the Vanguard, gazing out into the darkness of space. She wasn't sure what had driven her to join the military. Maybe it was the stories of Earth's forgotten past, or maybe it was her father, who had served before her. Whatever it was, it had brought her here, to this moment, where the fate of humanity rested in her hands. For the past few months, Earth had been working in secret. The Empire had no idea what was coming. No one did. The human race had been rebuilding. It had taken time, but they had created a weapon. A ship from an era long lost. The Vanguard wasn't like anything the Empire had ever seen. Earth's engineers had uncovered ancient technology from the depths of the ocean. And now, after years of work, they had created something that could stand up to the Empire's might. Rachel's fingers gripped the console tightly as the Vanguard drifted closer to the center of Earth's solar system. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. The quiet hum of the engines echoed through the bridge. She could feel the excitement building, but also the fear. They had no idea what the Empire would do in response. Would they fight back? Would they even notice? Suddenly, a low rumble shook the ship. It was subtle at first, like a distant vibration, but then it grew louder. It was a strange sound, one that didn't belong in the deep silence of space. The Vanguard's crew froze. Their eyes darted around the bridge, looking for the source of the noise. What was that? Lieutenant Carter asked, his voice tense. He was the ship's tactical officer, and if he was worried, then something was wrong. Rachel turned to her sensors officer. What's happening? The officer quickly scanned the systems. Nothing major, Commander. The engines are stable. No signs of external damage. But that sound, it's not coming from the ship. The rumble continued, growing louder, shaking the ship more violently now. The crew's faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear. The Vanguard wasn't the only ship in the fleet. Earth had a small but capable force, enough to stand against the Empire if they had to. But what could cause this sound? It wasn't a ship or an asteroid. It was something else. Rachel's mind raced. She wasn't the type to panic, but this was unlike anything she had ever experienced. She had read the history of space battles, the great wars fought between the Galactic Empire and other factions. But this was new, and it felt wrong. Commander, Lieutenant Carter said, his voice barely a whisper, I think it's coming from outside. Rachel nodded slowly. She could feel her heart rate rising, but she had to stay calm. All hands, brace for impact, she shouted. At that moment, the sound stopped. The ship was silent again. The sudden stillness was even more unsettling than the noise had been. The crew exchanged nervous glances. What had just happened? A voice broke the silence. Incoming transmission, Commander, said the communications officer, her voice shaking. Rachel nodded and moved quickly to the console. The screen flickered to life, and a grainy image appeared. A figure stood in the darkness, their face hidden in shadow. The transmission was scrambled, but the voice came through clearly. Earth, you've awakened the beast. Rachel's blood ran cold. The words echoed in her mind. What did that mean? And who was this? The transmission cut off as suddenly as it had started. Rachel turned to her crew, her mind racing. What the hell just happened? We've never seen anything like that before, Carter said, his hand shaking as he worked at his station. Who was that? And what did they mean by awaken the beast? Rachel's stomach churned. She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure. The Empire had no idea what they were dealing with, and Earth's destroyer, the Vanguard, was only the beginning. She gave a sharp command. Prepare for full scans. I want to know everything. Whatever that was, it's out there, and it's coming for us. The crew moved quickly, their eyes still filled with confusion and fear. But Rachel's mind was already focused. She couldn't afford to let panic take over. The Empire would soon learn that Earth wasn't the weak, forgotten planet they thought it was, and whatever force had just spoken to them, Earth would face it head-on. In the distance, far beyond the reach of Earth's atmosphere, a massive object loomed, hidden by the darkness of space. It had been there, watching, waiting, for centuries. And now, it was time to reveal itself. The battle for Earth was about to begin. The beast awakens. The crew of the Vanguard worked in a flurry of action, trying to make sense of the transmission that had just been cut off. Rachel stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the screens in front of her. The rumble that had shaken the ship earlier still lingered in her mind, like an echo from a forgotten nightmare. "Commander, we're receiving a new signal," reported Ensign Rice, the communications officer. Her voice trembled slightly as she looked at the monitor. "It's coming from the same location." Rachel nodded. "Put it through, Rice." The screen flickered to life once again, but this time the image was clearer. The shadowed figure was gone, replaced by a massive structure, something so large it nearly filled the entire screen. It was an enormous ship, ancient and battle-worn, its surface covered in strange markings and symbols that no one on the Vanguard could identify. The voice crackled through the speakers again, this time more distinct, but still full of menace. "You have awoken me, Earthlings. I have waited for centuries, and now you shall pay the price." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Rachel's heart raced, but she kept her cool. She needed to think. What kind of ship was this? Who was behind it? And how had they found Earth? She'd never heard of a vessel like this before, and from the looks on the crew's faces, neither had they. "Commander, we're picking up massive energy signatures from that ship," Lieutenant Carter said, his voice tight. "This is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's not registering on any known scans." Rachel's mind raced. Earth's military had been preparing for an attack, but this was no ordinary enemy. The Vanguard was strong, but even with its ancient technology, it was no match for the power radiating from this unknown force. "We need to prepare," Rachel ordered. "Alert all ships in the fleet. Get everyone ready for battle." "Yes, Commander," Carter replied, quickly issuing commands to the other ships in the fleet. There was no time to waste. The Vanguard was the tip of the spear, but it was only one ship. They needed to know what they were facing. As the crew worked, the shadowed ship on the screen remained still, like a sleeping giant waiting to strike. Rachel's mind wandered to the words the mysterious figure had said. "You have awoken me." Who was this? What kind of force had been hiding in the shadows for so long? "Commander," Rice spoke up again, breaking Rachel from her thoughts. "I'm getting another transmission. It's not from the ship. It's from somewhere else." Rachel turned to her. "Where is it coming from?" It's coming from Earth," Rice replied, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. A message from Earth. From who? Was it a warning? Was Earth under attack already? "Play it," Rachel ordered. The screen shifted, and a new image appeared. A face, one that was familiar, but one Rachel hadn't seen in years. It was her father, Admiral Jonathan Locke, one of the highest-ranking officers in Earth's fleet before he disappeared during a mission over a decade ago. She had never known what had happened to him, and this image confirmed her worst fears. "Rachel," her father's voice came through the transmission. "If you're seeing this, then Earth's time has come. The beast has awoken. It has been waiting, hiding, for far longer than anyone could have imagined, and it will not stop until it has taken what it wants. Prepare yourself. The Vanguard is our last hope." The transmission ended as suddenly as it had begun. Rachel stood frozen, the words of her father echoing in her mind. The beast had been waiting. What did he mean by that? How long had this force been hiding, and why had Earth not been warned? "Commander," Carter said, his voice low, "we've been getting reports from other ships. The energy signatures from that ship are growing. It's preparing for something." Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. The enemy wasn't just sitting there. They were preparing to attack. "Get the fleet ready to move. We're going to take the fight to them," Rachel said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "All ships, prepare for battle." She could feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. Earth's survival depended on them, and this mysterious enemy, the Beast, had shown no mercy. It was time for the human race to stand tall. As the crew worked quickly to prepare for the upcoming battle, Rachel stared at the massive, shadowy vessel on the screen. The words of her father echoed in her mind. The Beast has awoken. The battle for Earth had just begun, and Rachel Locke was determined to see it through. The first strike. The Vanguard was on high alert. Every crew member stood at their station, the hum of the ship's systems filling the tense silence. Rachel Locke stood at the command deck, her eyes fixed on the monitor in front of her. The shadowy ship, the Beast, still loomed in the distance, silent and ominous. But now, there was a palpable tension in the air. They knew it wouldn't be long before the enemy made its move. "Commander, we're getting a reading." Lieutenant Carter's voice broke through the quiet. "The energy signatures are spiking. They're preparing for something." Rachel's grip tightened on the armrest of her seat. The Beast was coming for them. She could feel it in her bones. "Prepare the fleet," she ordered, her voice steady, though inside, her heart raced. "Tell the other ships to be ready to engage on my mark." A chorus of confirmations rang out across the bridge as Carter relayed the message to the other ships in Earth's fleet. Rachel turned to Ensign Reyes, who was monitoring the enemy vessel. "Any movement?" Rachel asked. Reyes' fingers flew across the console. "Not yet, Commander. The ship is still stationary, but the energy readings..." She paused, her voice uncertain. "It's unlike anything we've seen. This could be a weapon of unimaginable power." Rachel took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew they had no choice. The Beast had made it clear that it was preparing to attack. Earth's fleet wasn't ready for this, but they had no time to prepare further. They had to act. "Let's not wait any longer," Rachel said, her voice sharp. "Take us in closer to the Beast. We're going to provoke them." "Understood," Carter replied, and the ship lurched forward as the engines powered up. The Vanguard closed in on the Beast, its massive size becoming even more intimidating as they approached. The ship seemed to grow more menacing with each passing moment, as though it were waking from a long slumber. The markings on its surface seemed to pulse with a strange energy, and the air around the Vanguard seemed to crackle with tension. "Hold steady," Rachel ordered, her gaze never leaving the looming vessel ahead. She could feel the weight of the situation. The fate of Earth rested on her shoulders, and there was no turning back now. Suddenly, without warning, the Beast fired. The sound of the explosion was deafening. The entire ship shook violently as the energy blast collided with the Vanguard's shields. The lights flickered, and alarms blared throughout the ship. Rachel gritted her teeth as she struggled to keep control. "Shields holding," Carter reported quickly, his voice tense. But the energy blast was massive. "We've taken a direct hit." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Return fire," she ordered. "Target their main weapons." The Vanguard's weapon systems powered up, and the ship fired back with everything it had. The blast struck the Beast's hull, but it barely seemed to register. The enemy ship's shields absorbed the hit without flinching. It was clear. This was no ordinary enemy. "Commander, we're outgunned," Carter said, his voice tight. "Their shields are holding strong. We're not making a dent." Rachel's mind raced. They had no way of knowing how powerful the Beast's weapons were, but it was clear now that they were facing something far beyond their capabilities. "We need to get closer," Rachel said. "Carter, bring us in at maximum speed. If we can't break their shields from a distance, We'll have to try something up close. Aye, Commander, Carter replied, and the ship lurched forward again, pushing its engines to their limits. As they closed the gap, Rachel's mind was filled with a single thought. They had to do something that would give Earth a chance. The beast wasn't just an enemy ship. It was a symbol of something much larger. It was a threat to everything humanity had built. "Brace for impact," Rachel said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. Another massive blast shot out from the beast. This time, it wasn't aimed at the Vanguard itself. It was aimed at the fleet. The entire bridge went quiet as the blast tore through one of Earth's smaller ships. The vessel exploded in a burst of fire, debris scattering into space. The loss of life hit Rachel like a punch to the gut. "Damn it," she muttered under her breath. "They're picking us off one by one." "Commander," Rice said urgently, her voice quivering with concern. "The fleet is starting to fall back. They can't handle this." Rachel's mind raced. She knew they couldn't afford to retreat. If they pulled back now, the beast would have the upper hand. They had to finish this fight before it was too late. "Rice, contact the fleet. Tell them to stay in formation. We fight together or not at all," Rachel commanded. "And tell them to concentrate fire on the beast's weapons systems. We'll focus on their shield generators." "Yes, Commander," Rice replied. The crew of the Vanguard had always been a family. They had trained together, fought together, and now they would face the greatest threat humanity had ever known. Together. The Vanguard charged forward, her engines roaring as they closed the gap between them and the beast. The enemy ship fired again, but this time Rachel was ready. With quick precision, she ordered the Vanguard to make a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding the blast. "This is it," Rachel said under her breath, her voice filled with determination. "This is where we end it." With everything on the line, the crew of the Vanguard prepared for the ultimate showdown. They would face the beast head-on. There was no turning back now. The tipping point. The battle raged on, and the Vanguard was in the thick of it. The energy blasts from the beast's weapons were relentless, tearing through the vast emptiness of space like thunder in the quiet dark. The shields of the Vanguard flickered under the onslaught, glowing bright with each impact, but holding strong. Still, the pressure was mounting. Earth's fleet was being pushed back. The beast's power was overwhelming, and Rachel Locke knew they couldn't continue like this for much longer. "Shields are at 30%, Commander," Carter reported grimly, his hands flying over the control panel. "We can't take much more of this." Rachel's jaw tightened. She could see the fleet in the distance, retreating one by one. The beast's power was too much, and with every ship lost, Earth's hope for victory dimmed. "Reyes, what's our status on their shield generators?" Rachel demanded, unwilling to give in to the mounting panic she could feel creeping into her thoughts. Reyes's face was pale, the tension clear in her wide eyes. "I'm analyzing their shields, Commander, but I'm not sure we have the firepower to break through them from here." Rachel's mind raced. She had to think fast. The beast wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of the power the Galactic Empire wielded. If they lost here, Earth would be exposed. No reinforcements were coming. There was no fallback position. The Vanguard was humanity's last line of defense. "Commander," Carter's voice broke her train of thought. "Their weapons are powering up again. This is it. We need to do something now." The last stand. The Vanguard drifted in space, its hull battered and smoking. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and alarms blared throughout the ship. Despite the damage, the crew was still alive, still fighting. But Rachel Locke could feel the weight of each passing second. They had launched everything they had at the beast, and yet the monstrous ship was still standing, its weapons recharging for another strike. "Status report," Rachel barked, her eyes glued to the view screen. The beast loomed ominously in front of them, its massive form blocking out the stars behind it. Earth's fleet was no longer visible, scattered and retreating, leaving the Vanguard alone in the battle. "We're down to 10% power in the shields, Commander," Carter replied grimly, sweat beading on his forehead. "Our engines are running at minimal output, and the weapon systems are offline. We've got nothing left, but we're still holding on." Rachel clenched her fists. The Vanguard was humanity's last hope, and they were running out of time. The Beast, on the other hand, was fully powered, and its weapons were more than capable of wiping them out. The crew had given everything they had, and yet the Beast was still there, looming, threatening to destroy everything they had fought for. Rachel's mind raced. There had to be something. They couldn't give up now, not after everything they had been through. "Reyes," Rachel said, turning to the chief engineer, "is there any way we can reroute power to the weapon systems? Anything?" Reyes looked up from her console, her face pale but determined. "I can try, Commander. It'll be risky, though. We're at critical levels across the ship, and if we push too much, we might not be able to keep the Vanguard operational at all. It's a gamble." Rachel hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "Do it. We don't have a choice." Reyes's fingers flew across the console, pulling up diagrams and rerouting circuits in a desperate attempt to restore some power to the ship's weapons. The whole ship groaned in protest as the power grid strained under the pressure. "Commander," Carter called out urgently, "the Beast is powering up again. If we don't act fast." Rachel's heart pounded as she watched the Beast's weapons charge. They had mere seconds before they were obliterated. "How much longer, Reyes?" she demanded. "Almost there," Reyes replied, her voice tense. "I'm just bypassing the main reactor now. It's risky, but we should have a few minutes of full weapon power." "Then let's make them count," Rachel said, her voice steely. She turned to Carter. "Prepare the weapons. We're going all in." The Vanguard shuddered again, the damage from earlier impacts taking its toll. But Rachel knew they couldn't retreat. They couldn't afford to run, not when they had a chance to win. The Beast's weapons fired. A massive blast of energy shot toward the Vanguard, faster than Rachel could process. The ship shook violently as the energy impacted their already weakened shields. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned, but the shields held. Barely. "Shields at 5%, Commander," Carter shouted. "We're on borrowed time." "Not long enough," Rachel muttered. "Rise, weapons now." Reyes's fingers slammed down on the console, and the Vanguard's weapon systems roared to life, humming with deadly power. "Weapons are online. We have full power," she called out. "Good," Rachel said, voice filled with cold determination. "All forward cannons, fire." The Vanguard's weapons unleashed a barrage of firepower, the sound of weapons discharging rattling through the ship. Energy blasts streaked toward the Beast, each one hitting with a deafening explosion, lighting up the void of space. The Beast's shields began to flicker, weakening under the relentless assault. "We're doing it," Carter shouted in disbelief. "It's working, Commander." Rachel's heart skipped a beat as she watched the Beast's shields fail. But she didn't let up. They couldn't. Not yet. "Keep firing. We can't stop now," Rachel shouted. The Vanguard fired again and again, each shot pushing the Beast closer to defeat. But then, just as victory seemed within their grasp, the Beast's weapons fired once more. A massive wave of energy surged toward them, brighter and more intense than before. "Brace for impact," Rachel ordered. The crew braced themselves as the blast struck. The Vanguard shook violently, alarms blaring as systems went offline. The ship tilted, and Rachel's stomach dropped as she realized they were losing power. "Shields are gone," Carter cried. "Hull integrity is failing." Rachel's mind raced. They were so close. They couldn't give up. Not now. "Reyes," Rachel shouted. "Get us one more shot. One more." Reyes's hands flew over the console, her face determined. "I can do it. Just give me a second." Rachel held her breath as the ship's lights flickered, then steadied. The Vanguard groaned as if protesting, but it was still operational. The beast loomed large on the screen, but this time there was a new look of weakness in its movements. "We've got one shot left," Ray said, her voice almost a whisper. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Fire everything." The final barrage from the Vanguard shot forward like a storm of death. The beast's remaining defenses flared briefly as they tried to hold back the assault, but the Vanguard's concentrated fire overwhelmed them. The energy blasts tore through the beast's hull, and with a thunderous explosion, the mighty ship finally buckled under the onslaught. The beast, once invincible, was no more. The Galactic Empire's greatest weapon lay broken in space. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as the screen showed the enemy ship disintegrating, fading into the void. The Vanguard had done it. They had won. But the victory was bittersweet. They had survived, but the cost had been enormous. The Vanguard was damaged beyond repair, and Earth's fleet was scattered. The war was far from over. The price of victory. The Vanguard hung motionless in the cold emptiness of space. The stars, once distant and unreachable, now felt like a faint reminder of the price humanity had paid. Rachel Locke stood in the command center, her hands gripping the edge of her chair, eyes staring at the broken remains of the beast drifting across the stars. The destruction of the beast was a monumental victory, but the cost had been unimaginable. The Vanguard was barely holding together. Half of its systems were offline, including most of the communication channels. The hull was scared from the energy blasts, and the crew was exhausted, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Everyone had given everything they had, but the war wasn't over. It couldn't be. "Commander," Carter's voice broke through her thoughts. "We've got a problem." Rachel turned toward the lieutenant, noticing the concerned look on his face. She had a feeling she already knew what he was about to say. "The ship's core is unstable," Carter continued. "We're losing pressure in the lower decks, and our remaining power reserves are almost depleted. We won't be able to stay afloat much longer unless we find a way to stabilize things. The engines are already down for the count." Rachel cursed under her breath. The Vanguard had been built to withstand nearly anything, but it had been pushed beyond its limits. She'd known it wouldn't survive much longer after that last battle, but she hadn't realized how close they were to total collapse. "How much time do we have?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with concern. "Maybe an hour," Carter replied grimly. "Maybe less." The clock was ticking, and they were stranded. There was no immediate help on the way. The Galactic Empire had retreated, at least for now, but they weren't the only threat. Other factions, other powerful enemies, still lurked in the vast reaches of space, ready to strike at Earth again. And Rachel knew it wouldn't take long before they came looking for the Vanguard and its crew. "We need to make contact with Earth," Rachel said, her mind already racing with the possibilities. "If we can't call for help, we'll have to make our way back ourselves." "Commander, the communication systems are down," Rise added, her voice strained. "Even if we get power back, it'll take us days to repair the comms. And by then, we might be a distant memory." Rachel stood up, feeling the weight of their situation pressing down on her. Earth's fleet had been shattered, and humanity was spread thin across the galaxy. No backup was coming anytime soon, and their time was running out. "We need to do something now," Rachel muttered. "We can't wait for Earth to send help. We'll have to rely on ourselves, just like we always have." She turned to Reyes, who was still working at her console, her face illuminated by the flickering screens. "What about the backup generators?" Rachel asked. "Can they hold long enough to get us home?" Reyes looked up, her brow furrowed. "It's a long shot, but I think we can stabilize the power long enough for a jump through the warp gate. We'd need to override the system, though, and that could overload the core. It's not exactly safe." Rachel's mind was made up. They didn't have time to worry about safety. If they stayed here much longer, they would be sitting ducks. Whatever the risk, they had to take it. "Do it," Rachel said firmly. "Prepare the warp gate coordinates. We're going home, whether it's safe or not." Reyes hesitated but nodded. "Understood, Commander." I'll start the sequence. As Reyes began working on the system override, Rachel glanced around the room at her weary crew. They had all fought for this moment, and now they were going to have to fight once more to get back home. The Vanguard might have been the last ship standing, but Earth still needed them. There was still hope. They couldn't give up, not when they had already come so far. The Vanguard groaned as Reyes initiated the sequence, and the whole ship shuddered under the strain. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered again. Time was running out. The ship was falling apart, but the crew worked with a sense of urgency that Rachel could feel in her bones. Every second counted. How long? Rachel asked, her voice steady despite the pressure mounting around her. 5 minutes, Reyes replied. I'm bypassing the main systems. I just need a little more time. Rachel nodded, walking over to the viewport. The beast's remains drifted silently in space, a reminder of the battle they had just survived. But she knew that this was only the beginning. The galaxy was still full of threats, and they had only just scratched the surface. Commander, Carter's voice was anxious as he checked his own console. I'm detecting something on the long-range scanners. It's a large ship, fast-moving. Could be trouble. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. They didn't have the firepower to fight another battle, not in their current condition. Can you identify it? Rachel asked, her voice calm but tight. It's hard to say, Carter said, his fingers flying across the console. But I'm picking up a signal. It's not from the Galactic Empire, but it's definitely military grade. Whatever it is, it's coming straight for us. Shit, Rachel muttered under her breath. They couldn't survive another battle. Not like this. Reyes, we need that warp gate now. Reyes's hands were moving faster than Rachel could keep up with, but the pressure was beginning to show. Sweat was dripping down her forehead, and her face was tight with concentration. Almost there, Commander, Reyes said. Just a few more seconds. The seconds felt like an eternity. Rachel's mind raced with a dozen possibilities. Whoever was coming, they wouldn't be here to offer a friendly hand. The Vanguard was a sitting target, and they were too weak to fight back. Now, Reyes shouted, her voice filled with relief. Rachel didn't hesitate. She hit the button to activate the warp gate. A hum filled the air as the warp gate came to life, crackling with energy. In an instant, the Vanguard was engulfed by the shimmering light, and the stars around them twisted into an unrecognizable blur. The ship lurched violently, the jump taking its toll. But they were gone. They had made it. The ship's systems flickered as the Vanguard broke free from the warp gate and into a new part of space. The crew slumped back in their chairs, exhausted but alive. Rachel looked around at her crew, relief flooding through her veins. They had made it. For now, the final revelation. The Vanguard drifted silently through the dark expanse of space. It had been hours since the ship's emergency jump, and the crew was still recovering from the intense strain of battle and the warp jump. The silence aboard the ship felt heavier than usual, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on everyone. They were out of immediate danger, but questions lingered in the air, unanswered and haunting. Rachel Locke stood at the bridge, staring at the view of the distant stars. They had made it. They had survived. But for how long? Commander, Reyes called from the console, her voice tense. We've made it to the designated safe zone. We're outside of enemy territory for now. But there's something strange happening with our readings. Rachel turned to look at her, brow furrowed. What do you mean? It's the ship's power core, Reyes explained. The core is, I don't know how to explain it, but it's recharging itself. We didn't send any command for this, but it's happening. Rachel's eyes narrowed as she approached the console. What do you mean by recharging? Is it stable? Not exactly, Reyes replied, her hands moving quickly across the console. It's not a normal process. It's as if the core is drawing energy from somewhere else. We're not sure where. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The ship's power core was one of the most complex systems on the Vanguard. It was designed to draw from the vast energy of the stars when needed, but this was something entirely different, something unknown. "Can we shut it down?" Rachel asked. Reyes hesitated before shaking her head. "It's beyond our control. It's almost like the core has become self-sustaining." A chill ran down Rachel's spine. If the core was somehow becoming self-sustaining, then they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. The Vanguard was already a symbol of humanity's strength. Was it possible that it had somehow gained an even greater power? "Keep me updated," Rachel said quietly. "I need to know if this turns into something more." Her mind raced as she moved to the tactical station. The galaxy had seen humanity's strength in the battle against the beast, but now it was clear there was more to the Vanguard than anyone could have expected. It was an unstoppable force, and it was growing. Minutes passed, but no one spoke. The tension was thick in the air. The ship was steady for now, but Rachel knew better than to assume that meant safety. Her crew had faced impossible odds before, but what awaited them now could be far more dangerous. Suddenly, Carter's voice broke the silence. "Commander, you need to see this." Rachel turned quickly. Carter's face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "What's wrong?" she asked, already preparing herself for the worst. Carter pointed to the screen in front of him. "It's the Galactic Coalition. They've found us." The screen flickered, showing the silhouette of a massive fleet. It was unlike anything Rachel had ever seen. A vast armada, far beyond anything humanity had ever faced. Her stomach dropped. They had made it out of one fight, but this was different. This was not a simple raid or a fleeting skirmish. The Galactic Coalition had followed them. "We've got a problem," Carter continued, his voice shaking. "They're not just coming to investigate. They're preparing to engage. We're outnumbered, and we don't have the firepower to survive this." Rachel's thoughts raced. The Vanguard was heavily damaged, and although the crew was ready to fight, their resources were limited. They had no allies in the area. It was just them, and an entire fleet ready to destroy them. Suddenly, Raya's voice echoed through the room. "Commander, you need to see this." Rachel turned and rushed to her side. The readouts on the console were flashing urgently. Rise had unlocked something. The core's strange energy buildup had shifted, and now the readings were pulsing with an intensity they had never seen before. "It's not just recharging," Rise said in disbelief. It's opening a portal." Rachel's heart raced. A portal? Was it possible that the Vanguard was somehow linked to something beyond their understanding? The portal on the readout grew larger, an ethereal light beginning to pulse with an otherworldly energy. It was pulling them in. "What's going on, Reyes?" Rachel demanded. "Why is it doing this?" I don't know," Reyes said, her voice trembling. "The core is reacting to something. It's almost like it's calling out. It's pulling in all this energy from the ship and from the void." Suddenly, the ship lurched as if it was being dragged into the unknown. The crew was thrown forward in their seats, and alarms blared across the ship.